Chapter 261, College Meeting. 5. Representative of the Transfiguration Department, Leo Malcolm, your transfiguration skills have always been impressive. I remember them well, Anduin chuckled. Leo, who had been named, couldn't help but twitch. He knew exactly what Anduin was referring to. 2 years ago, during Christmas, he had attacked Anduin and ended up getting beaten. He never expected Anduin to appoint him now. Representative of Potions, Randall Rosier. The appointment of 2 consecutive pure-blood wizards made everyone look at Anduin with admiration. However, Rosier, who was named, just nodded indifferently. What the others didn't know was that he had been a member of Anduin's circle for a long time. Representative of the subject of magic, Villain Higgs. Although I don't usually choose 7th graders, and I know you're preparing for your NEWT exams this year, this course is too important. I believe teaching is another form of review, and I trust you can handle it. Villain nodded solemnly, not particularly concerned about the appointment. Representative of the Astronomy Department, Louis Allerton. Representative of the History of Magic, Vivienne Bulstrode. Vivienne was taken aback when she heard Anduin's appointment. Why me? Can I really be a department representative at my level? She thought. Vivienne, to be honest, no one in the entire academy is better than you in the History of Magic class. You're usually too lazy, but now you have to take responsibility. Your other courses need improvement as well. In addition to tutoring students in the History of Magic, you should also work hard in other subjects. This year, I will not make any exceptions for you. Remember that, Anduin said earnestly. Vivienne was on the verge of tears. Why is it so difficult to be a slacker? She lamented internally. Representative of Muggle Studies, Jenny Moria. Representative of the Miraculous Biology Department, 6th grader Esther Lund. Representative of Divination Class, 6th grader Sophia Seck. Representative of the subject of Arithmancy and Divination, Louis Allerton. No one in the Academy is more proficient in this subject, so I can only invite you to be the subject representative for both subjects. Fortunately, these are elective courses, so your workload won't be too heavy. Louis nodded, feeling confident about his abilities in these subjects. Finally, Anduin raised his head and looked at the crowd. The representative of Defense Against the Dark Arts and Ancient Runes will be myself. For these 2 courses, I will personally guide everyone. In this way, a total of 7 department representatives were selected for the 12 courses, along with 14 team leaders. Among them, 3 people, including Anduin, overlapped as both department representatives and team leaders, making a total of 17 people standing in front of the queue. As Anduin called out their names, they appeared on the large screen, ensuring that the other students remembered them. Anduin then signaled the representatives to stand aside and continued with the rest of the process. The above is the arrangement of the college's organizational structure. Next, I will explain the content of the second part, establishing strict discipline guidelines. With a wave of his hand, the names on the screen shrank to one corner, and the words disciplinary guidelines appeared in the center. Starting today, everyone must strictly abide by the Slytherin discipline rules, which are divided into 3 major principles and 4 detailed rules. The 3 principles are: 1. Follow orders in all actions. 2. Maintain the honor of Slytherin House as your own responsibility. 3. Have a correct attitude, solidarity, friendship, and mutual respect. The 4 detailed rules are: 1. Attendance discipline. Anduin stood before the gathered Slytherin students, his demeanor stern and authoritative. From today onwards, every word and action of yours will represent Slytherin and safeguard the honor of our house, he began, his voice carrying a weight of seriousness that commanded attention. Starting with observing the rules and disciplines, I believe you can understand the 3 principles with your intelligence. Now, let me explain the various aspects of these rules. The so-called attendance discipline means that in all future courses, meetings, and self-study sessions, you must be punctual. You must not be late or leave early. One act of laziness can trigger a chain effect, so I am very strict on this point. Household discipline means that everyone has corresponding standards in the dormitory, dressing, and eating, Anduin continued. First of all, in the dormitory, all beds, tabletops, floors, and hats must be kept neat and clean. The house elves will wash your dirty clothes, but at the very least, your bed tops must be kept flat. He muttered to himself, "At least I didn't ask you to make tofu cubes." In terms of clothing, everyone must wear academic uniforms during non-break times and keep them neat without wrinkles. Collars must be folded properly, and shirts must not be turned out. Except for summer, the first button of the jacket is a discipline button. No unbuttoned jackets, no rolled-up sleeves, no slanted ties, and school badges must be worn. When dining, do not waste food or make noise with it. Do not make loud noises in the auditorium, and keep the table clean. Daily discipline applies to non-class time. You are not allowed to violate school rules for any reason, especially if you are caught by a professor or filch. At the same time, you must abide by daily etiquette. When you see school staff, you must nod and say hello, including to Filch, Hagrid, and Mrs. Norris. Walk with your chest up and head held high, 2 people in a row, 3 people in a row, and you are forbidden to run around. Anduin read out the various discipline rules with a blank expression. The little wizards couldn't help but look at each other, feeling the weight of the strict regulations. Most of them realized that they had not been adhering to such stringent standards. Finally, I will introduce an internal grade scoring system within the house. Each grade has a full score of 100 points. A reward and punishment system will be implemented. If you perform well, you will earn extra points for the house and receive rewards. But if points are deducted, whether they are house points or grade points, Anduin sneered, looking at the audience with a teasing glint in his eye, then you will be punished accordingly. Don't worry, it's not about copying books or cleaning toilets. Those are low-level methods. I guarantee you won't want to experience the punishments I have in mind, he added with a chilling laugh. Anduin's piercing sneer made everyone shiver, and many couldn't help but swallow nervously. Then, with a wave of his wand, a large stack of booklets appeared in his hand. He waved his wand again, and the booklets scattered and floated to the audience, each one landing precisely in the hands of a student. This is the Academy manual I compiled. It records all the rules in detail. You must strictly abide by them. I will be keeping an eye on you at all times, Anduin warned in a deep, resonant voice. End of this chapter. Chapter 262. College Meeting 6. After the little wizards received the booklet, they casually flipped through it and found that the content was more detailed than what Anduin had mentioned. It covered almost every aspect of their daily lives. Isn't this a bit too strict? I understand the need for punctuality and not losing points, but according to these regulations, we can't even talk while eating, and we have to be mindful of how many fellow students are around us when we walk. Louis, a prefect, felt these disciplinary requirements were excessive and couldn't help but ask, "What I want is exactly this level of strictness. You are not ordinary people. You are Slytherins." Anduin's voice suddenly rose. "Slytherins who regard honor as everything and aim to win first. If you just do slightly better than others, what's the use of simply winning a house cup? I want you to become true Slytherins. Slytherins who can maintain elegance and calmness and win effortlessly. And..." Anduin stretched out his right hand and slowly clenched his fist. "I want total victory with no weak points." Listening to Anduin's impassioned speech, the little wizards felt not excitement, but a fear that made their souls tremble. Is this what it means to be a Slytherin? To push oneself to the extreme? At that moment, they truly felt Anduin's naked ambition, a will colder than winter. Louis, who had asked the question, swallowed hard and realized his back was drenched in sweat. He didn't dare to speak further and lowered his head silently. "So, the rules, disciplines, and requirements I set for you are non-negotiable from the moment you step into the common room. There is no nonsense about becoming a dragon or a worm here. You must win, and you must win by my standards." Seeing that everyone was a bit nervous because of his words, Anduin calmed down and spoke in a clearer tone. "Let's get down to business." After discussing the organizational structure and discipline, the next topic is the 2 sessions and 1 exam. The 2 sessions refer to the weekly regular meeting and the monthly regular meeting. The weekly regular meeting is scheduled to start at 7 p.m. every Saturday. Everyone must attend on time. Attendance will be strictly checked, and no leave will be accepted. The monthly meeting which begins at 7 p.m. on the last Sunday of each month, is held in conjunction with the weekly meeting of that week. Leave is also not allowed. During these meetings, I will summarize everyone's point deductions and learning progress for the week and the month. At the regular meeting, we will punish those who violate discipline and reward students who perform well and make significant progress in their grades. The one exam refers to a monthly full-subject test. The test is scheduled for the day before the monthly regular meeting, which is the Saturday of that week. The test will take the entire day, and the results will be announced at the monthly general meeting the next day. You can perform poorly in the test initially, but I do not accept regression. Those who can't keep up with the progress will have all their weekend time taken away for remedial lessons. When Anduin finished explaining the 2 sessions and 1 exam, the crowd in front of him erupted in groans. The previous requirements were already strict enough, but now, losing their weekends seemed unbearable. "Silence!" Anduin sternly yelled. After everyone quieted down, he sneered. "I forgot to tell you that tomorrow, Sunday, there will be a preliminary exam in the college. Everyone must participate." "Everyone must wear their college uniforms to participate," Anduin announced. "Additionally, I will be inspecting everyone's dormitories and personal attire tomorrow. You have 1 night to get everything in order." The young wizards, who had been grumbling moments before, now looked at Anduin with dismay. Despite their reluctance, no one dared to defy him after their previous encounters. They could only grimace in resignation. "What? Judging by your expressions, were you ready to surrender before you even start?" Anduin's sharp eyes scanned the crowd. His words sparked a rebellious spirit among the young wizards, but no one dared to voice their defiance. Some even secretly resolved to prove their strength. "Don't worry. With me here, surrender is not an option. Remember to keep your ambition, your shrewd mind, and your will to win." "All right, that concludes this meeting. Grade leaders and department representatives, stay behind. The rest of you are dismissed." As soon as Anduin finished speaking, a wave of magic emanated from him. The pile of seats blocking the dormitory door floated up under his control, hovering above everyone's heads. The little wizards, who had relaxed at the announcement of their dismissal, now looked up in surprise, awed by Anduin's display of power. "What are you still doing?" Anduin snapped, dispersing the stunned crowd. Once the little wizards had left, he gently lowered the furniture and turned to the waiting group. "Gather around. There are some tasks you need to handle." The college committee members obediently stepped forward. First, the layout of the common room needs to be changed. These sofas and coffee tables are not conducive to study and meetings. Find 2 empty dungeons to store the seats. I've prepared some tables and chairs for meetings and self-study. Vivian, if you want, you can set up your mahjong and other chess and card tables in a separate room. Don't play mahjong in the lobby anymore. You can play in the room during your spare time on weekends, but only if your grades are up to standard. Anduin wasn't entirely against entertainment, but he set clear conditions. "Okay, but I doubt I'll have much time for cards in the future," Vivian replied, still haunted by the requirement to maintain grades above an E. She knew Anduin meant what he said and didn't dare to hope for leniency. Second, free up a few empty dungeons and arrange them as offices for the class committee. Do it now. I've prepared the test questions for tomorrow. After the exam, the representatives of each subject will come to the office to correct the test papers. I want to know everyone's results by tomorrow night." "Understood," the department representatives responded, hurrying towards the dormitory. As they left, Anduin called out to Velen, "Velen, let's discuss the Quidditch team next." End of this chapter. Chapter 263, Internal Affairs Inspection. The Quidditch team? If you hadn't mentioned it, I would have thought you had forgotten about it. You didn't say a word about it all night. Velen's eyes lit up at the mention of Quidditch. The main reason is that I don't pay much attention to it and need some professional advice. After all, Quidditch performance plays an important role in winning the Academy Cup. How is our team doing this year? Anduin asked, knowing that since the graduation of the Quidditch captain last year, Velen had taken over the captain's duties. "It's not bad. As long as we keep up with the training, we're still very competitive. I promoted your training methods within the team last year. Although we didn't master everything, our physical fitness has improved significantly, Velen said confidently, thinking of the current team. Does the team have any problems now, such as equipment, venues, or players? By the way, Vivienne is on the team too, right? How is she doing? Anduin inquired, curious about Vivienne's progress. In terms of equipment, our team is pretty well off at Hogwarts. Last year, Louis sold a few of his family's sweeping 5 stars to the team at a low price to participate in the team selection. Even though he caused a bit of trouble, he still couldn't make the team. Velen shook his head, amused. As for the players, there are no major issues at present, but we need to train a new seeker since I'll be graduating next year, Velen continued. As for Vivienne, I have to praise her. She performed very well initially, but because her broom is very flexible and she loves extreme maneuvers, she often couldn't control it and got thrown off. To increase stability, she actually gained some weight, and now her flying skills are among the best on the team. Anduin glanced at Vivienne in the distance with some surprise. Could it be that this girl is so resistant to losing weight because of Quidditch, even sacrificing her figure for the sport? Then, according to what you said, there shouldn't be any problems with Quidditch this year. I heard our college's grades were not bad last year, Anduin remarked. Yeah, we barely got second place last year, but that was mainly because we met Gryffindor in the second game. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had such a result, Velen recalled, shaking his head. Why do you say that? Our college seems to have won against Gryffindor last year, Anduin said, puzzled. Indeed, but after that game, our team had 3 injured players, making it impossible to train for the next month. We eventually lost to Ravenclaw, Velen sighed, shaking his head helplessly. So, the main reason hindering our Quidditch team's score is the grudge with Gryffindor, Anduin muttered, frowning slightly. Yes, although the past 2 years have seen some easing, as long as we're on the field, everyone still can't contain their anger. It always escalates into a full-blown fight. Even if we win, it often leads to injuries, affecting our performance in subsequent matches due to insufficient training, Velen explained, clearly distressed by the situation. I understand, Anduin nodded. Let's prepare for the next Quidditch match. First, I'll go to Gryffindor to discuss this. Charles has also become a prefect this year. We can try to communicate and control the situation to prevent the game from getting out of hand. After all, fighting us won't be good for their follow-up games either. Secondly, if I can't negotiate with them, we'll need to come up with a different strategy, Anduin concluded, determined to find a solution. Anduin commanded calmly, Since you want to fight, you can kill the opponent directly. At the same time, I will prepare enough wound medicine to ensure that you can quickly recover after the battle. Really? That's great, Velen exclaimed, his confidence immediately doubling upon hearing Anduin's plan. If that's the case, then I'm sure we can lead the Academy to win the Quidditch Cup this year. Confidence is a good thing. Go ahead and get busy. I have some preparations to make, Anduin replied, concluding his conversation with Velen. He then took out a seat from his interspatial ring and directed everyone to arrange the venue. Soon, the common room took on a new look. From the entrance, the stone hall now featured more than a dozen small tables, each measuring 1.6 x 0.8 meters, arranged in an island style. These tables could comfortably seat 8 to 10 people, making them perfect for the students' bout, self-study sessions, and meetings. After organizing everything, Anduin notified all the grade leaders to join him in inspecting the dormitories the next day. The following morning at 7 a.m., Anduin and a group of prefects knocked on the doors of all the dormitories. He instructed the group leaders to ensure that all the students stood in front of their dormitory doors after getting dressed. The Slytherin dungeon was quite unique. Upon entering the stone room, 2 passages branched off to the left and right, leading to the male and female dormitories, respectively. Small rooms were symmetrically distributed along each passage. At this time, the little wizards, rubbing their sleepy eyes, stood at attention in front of their doors, a bit panicked and trepidatious about the inspection. Stand up straight. It's already bright outside. Why are you still so listless? Anduin's crisp voice echoed in the corridor, driving away the drowsiness of the little wizards. Put out your hands. Look at you. Your fingernails are not clean, and there's still mud inside. Your morality is deducted. Why don't you buckle it up? Your boots are not shiny enough. Remember to wipe them off after breakfast. Why are your clothes crumpled? Use the housework spell to tidy them up later. If you don't know how, ask other students. What's the matter with your hair? You are not a Gryffindor lion. You don't need to look wild. And there are dirty things in your eyes. Clean them up quickly. What's the situation in your dormitory? It's one thing to rummage through your belongings, but why are there so many stains on the floor? Are you comfortable living in such a room? Anduin led a group of team leaders along the dormitory corridor, inspecting each little wizard's clothing and appearance meticulously, including their faces, hair, and fingers. If there was an issue, he would immediately point it out, order the students to make adjustments, and show the corrections to the grade leader behind him. After checking their appearance, Anduin would enter the dormitory to point out any deficiencies in their internal affairs. Initially, he even used magic spells to clean up the rooms for the little wizards, explaining the standards to others as he did so. End of this chapter. Chapter 264, The Exam. Although Anduin explained the inspection process meticulously, he was also incredibly efficient. In just over half an hour, he had inspected all the male and female dormitories. After completing the inspection, Anduin turned to the team leaders who had been following him. Did you see everything clearly? This time, I used an example to demonstrate the housekeeping standards for individuals and dormitories. Starting tomorrow, except on weekends, at 7 a.m. every morning, the team leaders of each grade will conduct housekeeping inspections on the students of their respective grades. Each grade will be taken as a unit. If they meet the standards, they will be taken to the auditorium for breakfast. However, if even one person in the grade fails, the entire grade cannot leave the common room. Today is an exception since it's the first day. But from tomorrow onwards, if I find anyone outside the common room who does not meet the housekeeping standards, I will deduct points from the corresponding grade. As team leaders, you must set an example. If you fail, you will face double punishment. With a stern expression, Anduin loudly instructed the group leaders. His voice was so loud that apart from explaining to them, he was also addressing the little wizards in the corridor. Establishing such standards required strictness and ruthlessness. Otherwise, it would be difficult for them to form a habit. Yes, Chief, the team leaders responded in unison, following Joey's lead from the previous day. All right, now head to the auditorium for breakfast. Students in grades 2 to 7 return to the common room before 9 o'clock to prepare for the test. Villain, after breakfast, take the first graders to familiarize themselves with the castle and identify the locations of the classrooms and libraries for each subject. Anduin instructed everyone. The little wizards, who had been standing for half an hour, finally relaxed upon hearing that they could disband. This was especially true for the first-year freshmen, who were excited to explore the castle with the 7th-year seniors instead of preparing for exams. Immediately, they rushed out like ducks whose cage door had been unlocked. All standing! Anduin shouted with a stern face when he saw their actions. Did you forget what I said yesterday? We are a snake yard, not a fish yard. 2 people in a row, 3 in a row. Don't you remember? Who told you to jump around? After being yelled at by Anduin, everyone tensed up and hurriedly gathered together, forming lines. With so many people moving together, it looked like a long snake winding forward. Anduin, like an instructor, followed alongside, inspecting the flow of people with sharp eyes. The people in front shouldn't move so fast. The people behind can hardly keep up. Look ahead when walking, don't daydream, and don't whisper to each other. Be careful to give way to pedestrians at intersections and the corners of stairs. If you can't keep up with the queue in front, just walk slowly. No one is urging you. As the flow of people moved, Anduin carefully reminded them, educating them in practice. The pedestrians they met along the way, whether professors or young wizards from other houses, all looked at this long stream of Slytherins with strange eyes. They wondered what was going on with these Slytherins, all of them moving in unison, without saying a word, and dressed so neatly on a weekend. As for the little wizards who were marching, Being looked at by others as if they were magical creatures made them a bit embarrassed, but they didn't dare to bow their heads or speak. Many blushed in embarrassment. Upon arriving at the auditorium, the little wizards of Slytherin circled the long Slytherin table. After everyone stood still in front of the table, they sat down and began to eat together under Anduin's command. During the meal, Anduin's stern gaze fell upon anyone who laughed, whispered, used their hands to hold food, or even cut their dishes too loudly. The peculiar scene at the Slytherin dining table stood out starkly against the sparsely seated tables of the other houses. Even the professors at the teachers' table couldn't help but glance over frequently. The Gryffindor students, in particular, pointed and laughed at the Slytherins, adding to the tension. Anduin noticed the discomfort among the Slytherin students, but remained unfazed. He thought to himself, they'll be the ones embarrassed later when they see Slytherin's disciplined behavior. It was still early when Lewis, who had attended the prefect meeting on behalf of Slytherin, returned. The Slytherin students were divided into two groups. One followed Anduin back to the common room, while the freshmen followed Lewis to tour the castle. Back in the dungeon, the Slytherins sat on new benches, quietly watching Anduin on the steps, awaiting the start of their exam. I know it was embarrassing to be stared at by others, Anduin began. The young wizards exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement. But remember, being different and not caring about others' opinions are traits Slytherins should embody. The strong don't need to explain themselves to the weak. Your task now is to learn how to be strong. Understand? Yes, Chief, the young wizards responded thoughtfully but promptly. All right, the basic exam is about to start. For this first exam, there will be no practical tests, only written ones. Answer the questions carefully, Anduin instructed. With a snap of his fingers, a stack of exam papers, quills, and ink appeared before the students. The only sound in the stone hall was the scratching of quills on parchment. Anduin stood quietly on the high platform, overseeing the exam. For each subject, students in grades 2 to 5 were given 40 minutes, while senior students, who had passed their OWL exams, had 1 hour per subject. Subject representatives were exempt from the exams. When time was up, Anduin cast a spell, causing the completed test papers to vanish, and the next subject's exam began. Including elective courses, each lower and middle grade student had to take 9 courses, while senior students had to take 6 to 9 subjects, depending on their specialization. At lunchtime, Anduin organized everyone to go to the Great Hall for a meal. After an hour's rest, the exams continued in the afternoon. The freshmen, who had returned from their castle tour, were instructed by Anduin to remain quiet and then quietly return to their respective dormitories. End of this chapter. Chapter 265, Negotiation. Until around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, all the students' exams were finally over. Anduin then ordered them to disband and summoned the department representatives to the office to correct the exam papers. By nightfall, Anduin had the results of the Slytherin House students. However, upon seeing the grades, he couldn't help but feel concerned. The foundation of these young wizards was not very strong. From the perspective of subject scores, 19% of subjects were below P, poor, 38% were A, pass, 34% were E, good, and only 9% were O, outstanding. This meant that 57% of the subjects were below E, which was simply unacceptable. Moreover, the average grades of each young wizard showed a significant disparity. The senior wizards in grades 6 and 7 all had grades above E, good. Of course, those with poor grades could not pass the OWL exam. Although they had fewer subjects and accounted for a relatively small proportion, after excluding them, the grades of the remaining 2nd to 5th grade wizards looked even worse. Among this group of young wizards, fewer than 20 had grades of A, pass, or above, and only 2 had grades of E, good, or above. One was Ibrahimovic in the 3rd grade, and the other was the prefect, Jenny. It seems that the middle and lower grades are the hardest hit areas in terms of grades. If this is the case, we need to adjust the plan a bit, Anduin mused. 7th grade wizards can't be moved as they need to prepare for their final exams. So the 6th grade wizards will have to assist the department representatives in tutoring the younger wizards while ensuring their own grades. He continued to strategize. We'll organize study groups according to grades and subjects. The The courses for grades 1 and 2 are roughly the same and can be combined into one group. Grades 3 and 4 can be combined into another group. Grade 5 needs to prepare for the AWOL exam, so they will form a separate group. Each subject representative will be equipped with 2 6th-grade assistants, acting as assistant subject representatives. The 3 will be in charge of 3 study groups, respectively, covering those little wizards who are struggling in the corresponding subjects. During evening self-study from 7 to 9 p.m., we'll have ordinary self-study time for homework, self-study, and answering questions. Those with poor grades in the corresponding subjects will stay from 9 to 11 p.m. for supplementary lessons with the study group. By tutoring one subject a day, and considering there are 7 main courses and 2 elective courses, including weekends, we can complete 3 rounds in a month, just in time for the monthly exam. Rubbing his chin, Anduin had already made up his mind about the next steps. He then called a meeting of all department representatives to convey his decision. Besides the history of magic, do I have to join the study group for remedial lessons? And I also have to give them remedial lessons about the history of magic. That means I have to stay in class until 11 p.m. every day? No, late sleeping will ruin my skin. Vivienne looked at Anduin with horror, tears welling up in her eyes. You still know how to complain. Where was this energy before? Anduin rolled his eyes at the lovely but pitiful Vivienne. As long as your grades in other subjects improve, you won't have to stay late. So, your fate is actually in your hands. No longer paying attention to Vivienne, Anduin turned to Louis and Wendy. Louis, Wendy, please invite all the 6th-grade wizards. We need their help with these measures. Wendy and Louis nodded, and after a while, the 6th-grade wizards were brought into the office. Anduin repeated his arrangement to these senior wizards. The situation is like this. For the sake of everyone's grades, I need your help now. Due to the shortage of manpower, some of you will need to be assistant department representatives for 2 or more subjects, Anduin announced. Of course, I won't force you in the name of Slytherin. He waved his hand, and a small wooden box appeared beside him. Opening it, he revealed rows of potions inside. These are nourishing potions. They're not much, but they're an encouragement for you. The department representatives will also receive them. Every time you volunteer to be an assistant department representative for a course, I will give you a bottle. In truth, even without the potions as compensation, these 6th graders would not refuse. They knew Anduin was acting for the good of Slytherin. Previously, the house had been stagnant, but now he was dedicating himself to revitalizing it, and they were happy to support him. However, the material rewards naturally made them more enthusiastic, and they quickly claimed the tasks Anduin assigned. Seeing this, Anduin nodded in satisfaction, but maintained a stern expression. I am pleased to see your willingness to contribute to the house, but I want to remind you that I will not overlook any disciplinary issues just because of your positive performance. Don't worry, it's voluntary. We just hope to see the Slytherin flag flying over the Great Hall this year, a 6th-year wizard said with a smile, and the rest nodded in agreement. All right. Anduin stood up with a serious face and placed his right hand on his chest. May the flag of Slytherin flutter in the sky. The glory belongs to Slytherin, and victory comes first. May the flag of Slytherin flutter in the sky. The glory belongs to Slytherin. Victory is supreme. Everyone present followed Anduin's movements, chanting in unison with the same solemn expression. After confirming the arrangements for self-study and study groups, Anduin announced the meeting's end, but stopped Velen as the others began to leave. What's the matter? Is there something else? Velen asked, puzzled. Have you forgotten our conversation yesterday? Anduin tidied up the table and smiled softly. What do you mean? Velen suddenly remembered. Are we going to talk to Gryffindor about Quidditch? So soon? I don't like to dawdle. When Louis went to the prefects' meeting this morning, I asked him to arrange a meeting with the Gryffindor prefects. We're meeting at the observatory at 8 o'clock tonight. They've agreed. It's about time now, and since you're the captain of our Quidditch team, you should come with me, Anduin said as he led Velen out. Is it okay for just the 2 of us to go? There shouldn't be any tricks, right? You know the relationship between our 2 houses. Velen said worriedly. It would be great if there were tricks. It would make solving the problem simpler. But Louis told me he arranged the meeting with Charles and the 7th grade male prefect. It seems they are sincere. Anduin replied with a tilted smile. Chapter 266, Anduin in the Eyes of the Lion House. When Anduin took Velen out, Charles accompanied Pascal Hawke, the 7th-year prefect of Gryffindor, to the astronomy tower. Pascal raised his hand to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead, taking deep breaths along the way. Charles, what do you think Anduin wants to talk to us about? Do you think he plans to ambush me under the cover of night? Pascal asked nervously, wiping his sweat again. Prefect, you don't need to be so nervous. Anduin is easy to talk to, Charles replied, shaking his head helplessly. Hey, that's Anduin Wilson we're talking about. How can I not be nervous? Pascal's anxiety only grew as he mentioned the name. So why was the Gryffindor 7th-year prefect so nervous, even a little afraid to mention Anduin's name? The reason lies in Anduin's reputation within Gryffindor House, which was far from low-key compared to his standing in Slytherin. Gryffindor House, unlike Slytherin, wasn't filled with intrigues. The students were cheerful, and everyone got along well. However, their unity often led to a strong propensity for causing trouble. They didn't care much about the house points and preferred to act on their whims. Charles, with his good character and personality, had a great relationship with everyone in the house and many friends. Not long after Charles entered school, and if most people knew he had a good friend in Slytherin named Anduin, no one held any prejudice against him for this. However, since Charles started studying with Anduin, he gradually became an Anblow, constantly bragging in the Lion House about how awesome and powerful his friend in the Snake House was. Initially, everyone took it as a joke. After all, how powerful could an unknown lower-grade student be? Bragging was common in Gryffindor, and everyone enjoyed it. But things changed 2 years ago. 2 significant events occurred that year. The first was the arrival of Bill, the second Anblow. This kid almost treated Anduin as his big brother, and he was very capable and good at studying. He quickly became a top student in the house, and his words carried weight. The second event was Anduin's feat of independently defeating 5 Death Eaters, earning the title of Battle Hero, and single-handedly taking on 10 people at the honor banquet. Gryffindor students loved heroes, and now there was a real hero at Hogwarts whose strength had been proven. This sparked a strong interest in Anduin. With multiple accolades and the constant praise from Charles and Bill, Anduin's reputation in Gryffindor soared. He became like a revered monk in the eyes of many students, powerful, low-key, and opposed to evil forces like the Death Eaters. Pascal, the prefect, knew Anduin better than most. He had obtained the Owl Certificate in Conservation of Magical Creatures and had a good relationship with Professor Kettleburn. By coincidence, Pascal learned from Professor Kettleburn last year that Anduin had done something even more impressive. He had defeated at least 4 werewolves and rescued more than a dozen magical animals. Pascal, not one to keep secrets, quickly spread the news in the house. With Charles and Bill joining in, the rumors grew even more legendary. As they reached the astronomy tower, Pascal couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and apprehension about meeting Anduin. In the beginning, it was said that 4 werewolves were defeated, and then the number kept increasing until it was rumored that Anduin single-handedly killed more than a dozen werewolves. Anduin was aware of these exaggerated tales, especially since Charles liked to boast about him. He found it amusing that people actually believed these stories. However, this caused Anduin's status in Gryffindor to rise significantly, with many young wizards idolizing him. Charles and Bill, known as Anduin's closest friends, also saw their status elevated. Part of the reason Charles was smoothly selected as a prefect this year was due to his association with Anduin. Having Charles as a prefect was akin to having the protection of a hidden boss in the academy. Anduin's reputation in Gryffindor was so formidable that he was never provoked by anyone from the Lion House, not only because he kept a low profile, but also because of his great renown. When Anduin was chosen as the Slytherin prefect, it was like watching a suspense movie for the Snake Court's family. They were initially unsure of Anduin's intentions. For the Gryffindor students, Knowing that Anduin became the prefect of the Snake House was akin to watching a horror movie in the middle of the night. They had heard from Charles and Bill that Anduin didn't have a good relationship with the Slytherin students. They had fought many times with the Snake Court and had never seen Anduin intervene. So, when they saw Anduin in the prefect's carriage, except for Charles, the rest of the Gryffindor prefects were filled with dread. This was too terrifying. Lewis had informed them that morning that Anduin was going to summon them tonight. As a result, Pascal had been anxious all day, torn between the excitement of meeting his idol and the fear of facing the big boss. Why did Anduin choose to meet at night? Could it be that he would disregard his superior heirs and deal with Gryffindor himself? Would he support the Slytherin students and force Gryffindor to submit? These thoughts made Pascal sweat profusely. Charles, Pascal swallowed nervously. Brother, I'm usually not mean, but if Anduin really wants to do something strange later, you can't just leave him alone. Prefect, as I said before, don't be so nervous. Anduin must be looking for us for something important. Although Charles tried to reassure Pascal, he couldn't help but feel uneasy himself. What I'm afraid of is that something will happen. Pascal's anxiety only grew with Charles's reply. Now, not only his forehead but also his chest and back were drenched in sweat. End of this chapter. Chapter 267, The Enigmatic Gryffindor Prefect. At this moment, Pascal noticed two figures standing quietly on the observatory. Under the bright moonlight, Anduin, who had his back to them, seemed to be enveloped in a layer of silver-white gauze, giving him an air of mystery. Pascal's uneasiness grew stronger as he took in the scene. The appearance of Anduin suggested that this meeting was not going to be friendly. He couldn't help but discreetly check his surroundings, mobilizing his magic to ensure there was no ambush. He shook his head self-deprecatingly. I'm so stupid. How could I think the other party would use such low-handed means? After all, it's Anduin. Pascal hadn't brought many people with him, fearing it might cause misunderstandings. If he angered Anduin, it would be disastrous. In his eyes, Anduin was unlikely to bring an entourage either. He would disdain such tactics. Suppressing his panic, Pascal calmed himself. As a Gryffindor prefect, he couldn't show timidity in front of outsiders. Approaching Anduin, he put on a serious expression. Anduin had arrived at the astronomy tower a bit earlier than Pascal. He had been lamenting the cold weather when he sensed Pascal's approach. Noticing that the 7th grade prefect of Gryffindor had come alone with Charles, Anduin nodded approvingly. Pascal's cautious movements and the way he manipulated his magic perception indicated he was stronger than many adult wizards. Truly, he was worthy of being the prefect of Gryffindor. Seeing Anduin's expression, Pascal's heart skipped a beat. What's his situation? Why did he smile when he saw me? Could this be a trap? But having come this far, there was no turning back. Although Pascal was panicking, he gritted his teeth and steeled himself. His complex state of mind made his facial expression stiff, giving an illusion of solemnity and seriousness. Prefect Hawk, Charles, I'm sorry to bother you so late. I really don't have time during the day, Anduin greeted Pascal politely. Hello, Prefect Wilson. I'm very glad to meet you. I've heard a lot about you, Pascal stammered, feeling embarrassed. His nervousness made it difficult to speak clearly. His rigid expression only made him look more serious. Anduin, observing Pascal's demeanor, thought, I haven't heard that the prefect of Gryffindor stutters, but even while stuttering, he maintains such calmness. His mental fortitude is impressive. Anduin nodded to himself, forming a good impression of Pascal. Pascal, feeling extremely ashamed, wanted to get to the point quickly. Prefect Wilson, I don't know why you asked me out. Please explain clearly, he said, trying to sound stern. Anduin, puzzled by Pascal's sudden straightforwardness, replied simply, I urgently needed to meet you today for two main reasons. One is about Quidditch, and the other concerns the conflict between our two houses. Really? He's going to attack Gryffindor. I knew it. Pascal's heart pounded violently. In his heart, there was a sense of desolation about his future and resentment towards Anduin for bullying others because of his strength. Impossible. We Gryffindors will never disband the Quidditch team just because of ignorance, and you shouldn't solely blame us for the conflict between the two houses, Pascal said bravely, his face slightly angry and his heart filled with a bit of grievance. As soon as Pascal's words came out, three faces with question marks immediately appeared. Not only Anduin and Velen, but even Charles, who was next to him, looked at him inexplicably. "Prefect Hawk, what did you just say? Who said your Quidditch team is going to be disbanded?" Anduin felt increasingly perplexed by the Lionhouse prefect, both in behavior and speech. "Ah, isn't it?" Pascal realized he had let his emotions get the better of him and had spoken his thoughts aloud. However, being an experienced prefect, he quickly composed himself. "I just wanted to show Gryffindor House's determination. Now let's get down to business." Anduin glanced at him, still puzzled, but decided, probe further. "You know the situation between our two houses. Whether it's in the Quidditch arena or daily life, there are always some outrageous behaviors. What do you think about this, Prefect Hawk? Isn't it out of line? Isn't this all normal? Who didn't get into a few fights when they were young?" Pascal wanted to scratch his head, but restrained himself for the sake of his image. "So you think it's okay to escalate the conflict between our two sides to a full-scale war?" Anduin narrowed his eyes, continuing to test him. "All-out war?" Pascal was suddenly alert. He knew that starting a fight was not an option, especially with Anduin as the current prefect of the Snake House. He quickly replied, "This is not possible. The relationship between the two houses is just a little friction. It shouldn't escalate to that level." "Since that's the case, I think that pranks escalating to brawls and daily struggles on the Quidditch pitch turning into armed combat are themselves constantly escalating the conflict. This is unacceptable," Anduin emphasized, seeing that Pascal's attitude was not very tough. At this point, Pascal began to calm down. Previously, he had been lost in his own imagination and nervous due to his close contact with Anduin, making his speech somewhat incoherent. But as the conversation progressed, his emotions eased. Hearing Anduin's words, it seemed he had some thoughts about these battles between the houses. "Then, Prefect Wilson, do you have any suggestions?" Pascal asked, his face no longer stiff. "My idea is actually very simple," Anduin smiled slightly and began to explain to Pascal. End of this chapter. Chapter 268, Fight Until the End, Seeking Monthly Ticket Recommendations. If we allow the current relationship between the two colleges to continue developing like this, we will only suffer losses in the end. Therefore, I believe it is necessary for us seniors to intervene, Anduin stated firmly. Pascal, trying to suppress his imagination from running wild, asked, "Then how do you think we should intervene?" "In terms of Quidditch, we can agree not to use overly outrageous tactics and behaviors. After all, if the game does not follow the rules, even if you win, you will not have a sense of accomplishment," Anduin explained. "Moreover, judging from the results of previous years, our two teams playing to the end often results in the biggest loss for ourselves. The experience of missing training due to injuries and then losing in subsequent games is not a good one." Anduin's proposal was sincere. Pascal, relieved that Anduin's request was reasonable, responded, "You mean we should advise our players to play with regular tactics?" "Yes, no problem." "Okay, Prefect Hawk, it seems we can reach a consensus on this point," Anduin said, surprised at how quickly Pascal agreed. "In that case, let's make an agreement here. In the next Quidditch match, we promise not to prioritize bad fouls, and I hope you will do the same." "No problem. I am the captain of the Gryffindor team this year. If we can really play fair, we will not object. But are you sure you can make your players obey? If they still fight, it would be difficult to talk to them next time," Pascal expressed his concerns. "You don't have to worry about it. I am the captain of the Slytherin team this year. I will keep them restrained on the field," Velen interjected. He had come specifically for this agreement. "Okay, if we are both on the field, it will be much easier," Pascal nodded, confirming the agreement. "Since the matter of the Quidditch game has been settled, it's time to talk about another matter," Anduin continued, seeing that the negotiation was going smoothly. Pascal, now understanding Anduin's position, realized that he was not trying to sideline, but was more willing to maintain justice. He silently chastised himself for doubting Anduin, the nemesis of evil, and felt ashamed for his previous thoughts. The other matter is the daily conflict between the two colleges. Presumably, Anduin will not be biased, but it is not easy to solve this matter, Pascal thought, frowning. You're talking about conflicts between the colleges, but for us, these little wizards are not as easy to manage as Quidditch players. You should also know the situation in our colleges. It's not that they will definitely listen to me, Pascal stated truthfully. I understand, Anduin nodded. It's irrational to completely suppress their conflicts, so I thought of a better way. Oh, what way? Pascal asked curiously, raising his eyebrows. The conflict between them, in the final analysis, is the conflict between individual young wizards. Comparatively speaking, most of the students in the academy don't want to take the initiative to get involved, Anduin explained with a smile. Pascal nodded in agreement. He knew it was indeed the case. Even in the Lion House, not everyone was so aggressive. Since it's mainly the conflicts between individual little wizards, let's find a way to release their tension in a controlled manner, Anduin suggested. Conflicts and emotions, Pascal repeated, his brow furrowing. Release. How? Duel, Anduin replied, his gaze steady and indifferent. It's better to confront issues head-on rather than avoid them. If there are conflicts between Gryffindor and Slytherin students in the future, they should be resolved through duels. Pascal raised an eyebrow, intrigued. A duel? Yes, Anduin continued methodically. Senior wizards from both houses will act as witnesses. Both parties will only use their wands. After the duel, regardless of the outcome, neither party is allowed to harass the other in their daily life or studies. If someone is still satisfied, they can apply for another duel. However, each person can only participate in one duel per week. Pascal nodded thoughtfully. A duel is a good idea. If there are grudges or disputes, we should agree on a time and place to resolve them. This way, both parties can be satisfied. It prevents the endless cycle of pranks and retaliations. Exactly, Anduin agreed. I suggest that the prefects organize and supervise the duels. The venue will be decided alternately by both parties. The supervisors must ensure that the conflict does not escalate and that everyone keeps their promise not to cause trouble outside of the duels. Anduin's eyes sharpened. Otherwise, I won't hesitate to teach them a lesson about integrity. Pascal's heart raced, but he maintained a calm exterior. Don't worry, I'll talk to them when I get back, he replied, his voice steady. Inside, he was relieved. Anduin's words alone would be enough to keep the lion cubs in line. After negotiating for a while longer, Anduin and Pascal reached a consensus and parted ways. Pascal felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It was a relief to be done with the intense conversation with Anduin. Anduin, on the other hand, was quite satisfied with the outcome. He hadn't expected the Gryffindor students to be so reasonable, and he was impressed with Pascal, the unpredictable prefect from the Lion House. I didn't expect it to go so smoothly, Anduin remarked to Velen, who stood beside him. I thought we might have to fight them. Indeed, Velen agreed. But Prefect Hawk from the Lion Academy is straightforward and doesn't procrastinate. Now that we've resolved the issues with the Lion House and Quidditch, we can focus on dealing with these little snakes, Anduin said, feeling more relaxed. End of this chapter. Chapter 269, The Disappearing Chief. You still have a way. In just 2 days, the status of these little wizards in our academy has changed a lot. They seem to be very determined. In addition, the relationship with the Lion Academy has been dealt with, and the rest is easy, Velen observed, noting the changes in the academy. It was the first time he saw such a strong vitality burst out from these little wizards. This is just the beginning. Now is not the time to be blindly optimistic, Anduin replied, shaking his head. It is very difficult to develop habits. Don't be deceived by these appearances. The next step is a competition of willpower. If the heart is not hard enough and the principles are not firm enough, it won't be long before it returns to its original state. Are you really planning to punish them for making some trivial mistakes? Velen asked, puzzled. In his eyes, the most important thing was the Academy Cup. As long as they could guarantee fewer points deductions and have excellent Quidditch results, they had a good chance of winning. The standards and learning goals mentioned by Anduin seemed like lofty ideals that were hard to realize. Do what you say. Maintaining integrity and fairness is the core of management. I will not only punish them, but also be strict and serious, without any leniency, Anduin said with a slight smile. However, punishing them for trivial matters Won't it be counterproductive? I think it's enough to catch a few models for the prestige you have built up in the academy with great difficulty, Velen hesitated. On the contrary, if you want to deal with them strictly, you must ensure that they are treated equally. Otherwise, it is more likely to cause problems, Anduin explained. Punishment is a learning process, and the corresponding punishment helps maintain discipline and system. First of all, the punishment should be simple and straightforward. If it is too long or too cumbersome, it will cause negative emotions, affect the mood, and make the state worse. So, it is not advisable to copy books or punish with self-criticism. Secondly, there must be no insult to personality or dignity during the punishment. Otherwise, it will easily cause resentment, especially in public. As long as the handling is fair, just, and open, there will be no problem. So, if you want these little snakes to develop good habits, you have to endure it like an eagle. Of course, this includes you. You know I'm a man of my word, Anduin said, giving Velen a meaningful glance before quickly disappearing. Velen tried to digest Anduin's words, but was still a little confused. However, he understood the last warning. Even if he made a mistake, Anduin would never show mercy. After the two returned to the common room, the little wizards had also rested, and what they had to do now was to welcome the official class. The next day, at 7 in the morning, there was a knock on the doors of the dormitory of the students who had classes in the morning in the Slytherin dormitory hallway. It was the head of the year group who called the door. The students, nervously opening their dormitory doors, looked around and found that only the grade leader was there. Anduin was not present. Compared to the grade leader, they were actually more afraid of the intimidating chief. Faced with such a situation, the reactions of these little wizards varied. Most of them were quite self-conscious. After all, it was only the second day. They cleaned up their rooms themselves and then asked the grade leader to check them again. After that, they waited honestly at the door, ready to head to the auditorium for breakfast once the entire grade was ready. Breakfast together was a routine, but a few young wizards were not so obedient. With the chief absent, they felt relaxed, leading to various situations. Some young wizards stayed in bed, thinking it was too early to get up, and returned to their dormitories. No matter how much the grade group leader urged them, it was to no avail. Others, with higher emotional intelligence and good relationships with the grade leader, either pleaded for mercy or tried to get close to the leader, hoping to escape inspection. To them, the internal affairs requirements were not a big deal. Even if they were violated, no one would take it seriously, and at most, they would be scolded briefly. Joey Hickman, the leader of the 4th grade, faced such a problem. Although he used to be a bit of a fool, he was friendly and loyal, making him well known among his peers. Since being appointed as the grade leader by Anduin, he felt valued and needed, strengthening his determination. However, when a few friends pleaded with him, his loyal side emerged. Despite his initial resistance, he allowed a little wizard who wanted to sleep late and 2 others who were disrespectful of discipline to get away with it. He even ignored the ink stains on their collars, choosing to turn a blind eye. When Joey left the dormitory and entered the stone room hall, he didn't find Anduin and had no idea where he went. Seeing Anduin absent, a small group of young wizards felt more relaxed and didn't line up as they did yesterday. However, Velen, Wendy, and Janie, who were in the senior grades, knew Anduin's tactics were very strict, so they didn't dare to relax and continued to supervise the students around them. The first-year freshmen, who had just entered school, also didn't dare to disobey Anduin's orders and behaved honestly. Throughout the day, these young wizards noticed Anduin was nowhere to be seen in the common room, auditorium, or castle corridor. He was absent from morning to night, even during mealtime. The 5th graders in the same grade couldn't find Anduin in class, as if he had vanished from Hogwarts. Only Velen remained vigilant, recalling Anduin's warning from the previous day. He sensed something was amiss and kept his classmates in check all day. As the students of Snake Academy finished their day's studies and approached the 7 o'clock evening self-study session, the absence of Anduin all day made some young wizards slack off. Without supervision, they became a bit lax. Although the grade leaders were present most of the time, They couldn't monitor everyone, and some even slacked off themselves. Small issues like talking loudly or grabbing food with their hands went unchecked. End of this chapter. Chapter 270. Attendance. The accumulation of such situations had led to more frequent desertions among the younger wizards. For instance, during the self-study period, except for grades 6 and 7, many students from other grades were absent. But just before 7 p.m., Anduin appeared out of thin air. Everyone was sitting in the hall, chatting, with some younger wizards rushing in. Suddenly, a figure materialized on the stone steps. Many students were startled and immediately fell silent, signaling their noisy classmates to do the same. The experienced senior wizards quickly recognized the disillusionment charm. Their chief had likely been there all along, hidden from view. Their hearts skipped a beat, realizing that Anduin had been observing them the entire time. The senior wizards, understanding the situation, looked at the younger students with pity and felt grateful towards Velen and Wendy. Many of these senior students were pure-blood wizards, known for their strict adherence to rules, making them the most disciplined. Anduin stood still on the stone steps and then used his magic to form an air wall with an obstacle spell, blocking the corridor leading to the dormitories and the outside world. Evening self-study has officially started. From now on, all those who do not show up will be considered absent. Anduin's cold voice echoed throughout the hall. The young wizards who had already taken their seats looked at Anduin with apprehension. Those who arrived late were blocked by the barrier spell at the entrance, which now resembled a transparent glass wall. They could see and hear what was happening in the hall, but couldn't enter. Now, all grade leaders stand up and report attendance. The report format is grade sex. How many people should arrive? How many people actually arrived? And how many people have not arrived? If everyone is present, report all present. If not, report the names of those absent, Anduin instructed, ignoring the nervous glances from the students. The group leaders had no choice but to stand up with grim expressions, quickly counting the number of students in their grades. Some leaders, like Velen and Wendy, remained calm, while others showed panic and nervousness. Don't dawdle. Report quickly. This is a necessary procedure for every self-study and meeting. If you waste a minute, you are wasting everyone's time, Anduin urged sternly, then turned to Velen. Starting from grade 1, report one by one. Yes, there should be 7 students in grade 9, and there are 9 students, all present, Velen reported calmly. Okay, please sit down, Anduin nodded at him, then looked at Wendy. There should be 6 students in grade 12, and there are 12 students, all present, Wendy reported with equal calmness. Anduin motioned for her to sit down and then continued to look at the lower grades. The 5th grade should have 15 people, but there are 14. One person didn't arrive. It was Sybil Rosa. She was just one step away. Jane began to explain, looking at Sybil who was blocked in the passage behind her, but Anduin interrupted her. Don't make excuses. Being late is being late. If everyone says they're just a little late, what's the point of being punctual? Continue. Anduin dismissed Jane's excuse, maintaining his stern demeanor. Anduin turned his head to Joey, who was in the 4th grade. Joey, the leader of the 4th grade, was the most nervous at this moment. His face was covered in sweat, but after seeing Anduin staring straight at him, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and report. There should be 14 students in the 4th grade. However, only 4 have arrived. The 11 who did not show up are Nico Berrigan, Akko Reyes, and Rumen Haywood, Joey reported nervously, glancing anxiously at Anduin. Anduin, standing on the stage, listened to the report with a blank expression. He took a pen and recorded the information on the recording board without saying a word. His expression remained unchanged as he turned to the next person. There should be 17 students in the 3rd grade, and all of them are Ray, the 3rd grade leader reported. The 2nd grade should have 20 students, but only 2 have arrived. The 18 who didn't show up are. The 2nd grade leader continued. The 1st grade should have 23 students, but only 1 has arrived. The 22 who didn't show up are, the 1st grade leader added. Soon, all the grade leaders reported their attendance. Except for grades 3, 6, and 7, there were absentees in each grade. Out of the 110 students in Slytherin House, 6 were late, which made up 5% of the total. This made Anduin's face even more stern. Do you think I'm joking, or do you think I'm kind? After only disappearing for a day, so many of you dare to ignore discipline. You really think highly of yourselves, Anduin snorted coldly, his tone harsh as he looked at the students. The little wizards who were reprimanded trembled, including those who were blocked outside the stone hall and those who were late in the passage. Come in, all of you, and stand on the stone platform, Anduin commanded, waving his hand. The barrier spell at the entrance of the passage was lifted, and the 6 little wizards in the entrance and the passageway of the dormitory lowered their heads, looking ashamed as they approached him. Is it interesting to be late, or do you think you can show your capability by ignoring the rules I made? It seems you don't take me seriously at all, Anduin said sternly, looking at the 6 students. No, it's not like that. We just forgot the time, one of the little wizards explained anxiously. Forgot the time? That's a good excuse, but look at the remaining 104 people in the audience. Can you explain why they haven't forgotten the time? This is only the 3rd day of school, Anduin retorted coldly, ignoring the excuse. Under his questioning, the rest of the little wizards had nothing to say and could only bow their heads in embarrassment. Since you have violated discipline, you will be punished. Let's start with you tonight. Every person who is late will do 30 push-ups on the spot, Anduin declared coldly. Push-ups? The few students standing on the stage looked at each other in confusion, not understanding what Anduin meant by push-ups. It seems you are not very clear, so let someone demonstrate it to you. All future punishments will be carried out in this way, Anduin said, turning to the side with a stern face. Velen, come out and demonstrate the action. End of this chapter. Chapter 271, Punishment. Velen curled his lips in frustration. It wasn't him who was being punished, but he had to demonstrate anyway. He walked to the front desk and showed everyone how to do push-ups. After seeing Velen perform a few with ease, the little wizards on the stage felt relieved. The movement seemed simple, and Velen didn't appear tired. Have you seen clearly? Remember, the movements should be standard. Your body should not touch the ground. Follow my command later. I will count to 30 for you, Anduin instructed the crowd. Get ready for push-ups. The 6 students climbed down from the stone platform, waiting for Anduin's command. At this point, their expressions were relatively relaxed. 1, Anduin called out, and the students bent down like models. 1, he shouted again after they stood up. But everyone noticed something was off. Why did he call out 1 twice? They looked at Anduin with puzzled eyes. Some of your actions are not up to standard. I won't continue counting until everyone meets the standard, Anduin said coldly. The students lying on the ground exchanged wry smiles upon hearing this. 1, still not up to standard. 1. 2. Anduin continued his punishment. Initially, none of the 6 students could pass directly. By the time Anduin finally shouted 10, they realized how challenging the push-ups were. Continuous push-ups use the strength of joint rebound, making them less tiring, but pausing each time made it extremely hard. When Anduin yelled 10, they had actually done at least 20 push-ups. Even from the audience, it was clear their hands were trembling on the floor, and sweat dripped slowly from their faces. 25. 26. As time went by, the exhausted students' actions became less standard. Although they were close to finishing the punishment, they kept repeating due to non-standard movements. 30. When Anduin finally finished counting, the 6 students were completely exhausted, lying on the ground and panting heavily. Okay, the self-study and attendance punishment is over. Hurry back to your seats, Anduin urged them to get up and return to their seats. He then shifted his gaze to the rest of the students. The attendance punishment is over. Theoretically, it should be time for self-study, but your performance today really disappoints me. Anduin scanned the audience with a stern face. The students lowered their heads in shame. I originally wanted to address this after the evening self-study, but too many of you violated discipline and regulations today. It seems I have to take up some self-study time to teach you about respect and awe. Let's address this one by one. Anduin took out a recording board and glanced at everyone coldly. First, internal affairs violations. Since this morning, some of you have walked out of the Slytherin common room with messy and sloppy appearances. Gar Murray, a second-year student without a college badge. Lumen Haywood and Dantai Mulenga, fourth-year students without disciplinary buckles. Anduin spoke quickly, listing the names of those who didn't meet the attire regulations. Each time a name was read, the person called out felt a thump in their chest. Anduin had seen everything and missed no one. Those whose names have been read, stand up, Anduin commanded. Stand up and come out. Under Anduin's short and powerful order, the little wizards who had made mistakes stood up dejectedly. Among them was Lumen Haywood, a fourth grader who had been fined 30 push-ups for being late. Now he stood there, his legs trembling with fear. And their grade leader, stand up as well, Anduin shouted loudly. As the group leaders stood up one by one, Anduin slowly walked down the steps towards them. Do you know why you were called up? He asked. Yes, it's because we didn't check properly, Joey stammered, looking at Anduin, who had come closer. The inspection wasn't thorough? No. Anduin shook his head. I saw your behavior this morning. Take you, Joey, for example. You knew something was wrong, but you didn't address it in time. You were maliciously conniving. Anduin walked up to Joey, staring at him seriously, and shouted sharply. No, I'm not. I thought it was just an ordinary button, and they didn't cover it with a tie. It's not particularly serious, and they must know it's wrong. Joey pleaded nervously for the two students beside him. They know it's wrong? It's not particularly serious? Anduin sneered at Joey's argument. Do you know what your behavior means? The moment you indulge them, your standards are lowered. One button is missing today, and tomorrow you can be sloppy, and the day after tomorrow you will ignore discipline altogether. And do you think what you're doing is simply cleaning up housework? Anduin's gaze swept over Joey and everyone else. Even if you want to change the world, you have to start by tidying up your clothes and making your bed. If you clean up every morning, you'll accomplish the first task of the day. This will give you a sense of accomplishment and motivate you to tackle and complete more tasks. In the end, you'll find that the first task you complete will drive you to complete more. This reflects the fact that every little thing in life is important. If you can't handle small tasks well, you certainly won't be able to handle big ones. Joey, do you think you're helping them? You're wrong. You're harming them and yourself at the same time. Anduin shouted angrily at Joey and everyone around him. After listening to Anduin's words, both Joey and the little wizards who had violated the discipline lowered their heads in shame. Chief, I was wrong, Joey said, looking at Anduin with shame. But it's all my fault. If you want to punish someone, punish me. I am willing to accept the punishment for Lumen and Dantai. End of this chapter. Chapter 272, Strict Enforcement. Oh, everyone will be punished with 30 push-ups for breaking the rules, and you are among them. If you insist on bearing it for them, the total will be 120, Anduin said, his face expressionless. I understand, Joey replied, his face showing some fear, but his eyes remained firm. No, Lumen and Dantai, standing next to him, felt guilty because Joey was implicated by their actions. Seeing that he wanted to take the punishment for them, they felt even more remorseful and quickly spoke out against it. We were the ones who ignored Joey's inspection. We should bear the punishment ourselves, they said, facing Anduin with brave expressions. Seeing the two thinking of him so much, Joey felt even more guilty. He noticed Lumen's arms trembling from the fatigue of doing push-ups and opened his mouth to say something. That's enough. This is not a street stall in Diagon Alley where you can bargain, Anduin coldly interrupted their pleas. He would not relax his standards just because of their touching brotherhood. 30 push-ups per person, no excuses. Get ready on stage now, Anduin commanded. Seeing that Anduin was so merciless, everyone gave up their chances to argue and obediently stood on the podium, waiting for Anduin's signal. 1, 2. Anduin's strict enforcement was almost obsessive. This scene not only exhausted the little wizards physically and mentally, but also instilled fear in those watching from the audience. It was the first time they had seen such uncompromising standards of execution. The persistence and strictness brought a huge shock to their hearts. Lumen, who had been punished for being late before, now had a grim expression due to exhaustion. Every time he got up, he roared, and his trembling was visible to the naked eye. In fact, Anduin had secretly lowered part of the standard because he knew that with the physical fitness of these little wizards, they couldn't support so many standard push-ups. He just supervised them strictly in the first few rounds. But Anduin still kept a stern face, giving the impression of being merciless. As he finally shouted 30, the little wizards took their last breath, especially Lumen, who had experienced 2 punishments. He couldn't even climb up and had to be dragged down the steps by the shoulders of those around him. After the punished students returned to their seats and settled down, Anduin continued with a blank expression. Okay, the above was the punishment for those not qualified in clothing. Next, we move on. When Anduin announced the next item, the faces of the little wizards sitting in their seats became more frightened. Wasn't it over yet? Were they really going to go through each infraction one by one? Everyone frantically recalled their behavior that day, fearing they might be caught, especially those who had been punished before. They had all seen Lumen's ordeal, and now waiting for Anduin's roll call felt like waiting for the end of the world. Irregular dining etiquette, 3rd grader Cliff Palmer, loud at lunch, 2nd grader Julie Tamor, grabbing food with her hands at dinner. As Anduin read out each name, the little wizard called could only stand up with a sad face. They hadn't expected someone to be watching them even while they ate. When Anduin read the last name, everyone in the hall couldn't help but gasp. 4th grader Rumen Haywood throws food at dinner and wastes more than half of it. Everyone turned their gazes to Lumen, who stood up wanting to cry without tears, looking at Anduin with a dismal expression. This was his 3rd punishment. The previous one had nearly killed him, and now it hurt just to lift his arm. Seeing that Lumen was singled out again, Joey couldn't hold back any longer. He felt guilty because it was his failure to strictly enforce the disciplinary requirements that had allowed Lumen to relax. Feeling responsible, he quickly stood up and shouted, "Chief, call for a report. Who allowed you to stand up?" Anduin's stern gaze bore into him. Joey, seeing this, obeyed, iantly sat back down and then shouted, "Report. Speak," Anduin commanded, his hands folded as he looked at Joey coldly. "Chief, Lumen's body really can't endure this kind of punishment anymore. I believe he already knows he was wrong, so I beg you to let him off this time." Joey's voice was earnest, and both he and Lumen looked at Anduin with pleading expressions. "Oh, Lumen, do you really understand your mistake?" Anduin asked, his eyes narrowing with interest. "Yes, Chief, I won't dare to do it again." Lumen nodded vigorously, looking pitiful. "And what about everyone else's opinions? Are you all willing to exempt him from this punishment?" Anduin asked, glancing around at the group. "He really looks like he can't take it anymore. Chief, why don't you let him off this time? I think he must have learned his lesson. You should let him go." The other young wizards, seeing Lumen's miserable state, began to persuade Anduin one after another, including those who were also awaiting punishment. Joey and Lumen were deeply moved by their support and cast grateful glances around. "Oh, it seems you have finally learned a bit about unity and friendship, which is commendable." Anduin nodded slightly, showing a hint of approval. Joey and Lumen, standing there, finally breathed a sigh of relief, thinking Anduin might let Lumen go. But Anduin's face hardened again after his brief praise. Although everyone is willing to forgive him, discipline does not allow it. Hearing Anduin's words, everyone's faces fell. Joey, anxious, said, "But, Chief." "No buts," Anduin interrupted, looking at them seriously. "If you make a mistake, you must be punished. This is called fairness. If we only punish the first 2 times and then find excuses to avoid the rest, wouldn't that mean you could violate discipline at will in the future, knowing only the first 2 times will be punished?" We don't mean that. The main reason is that Lumen's body really can't take it anymore. Could you let him owe it and make up for it tomorrow?" Joey pleaded. "Today's work must be completed today. There is no excuse for delay," Anduin replied firmly. He then leaned in close to Joey, staring at him sharply. "Do you know what's wrong with always speaking up for others like this?" End of this chapter. Chapter 273, Self-Study. Joey's face turned pale when Anduin confronted him. He stuttered, unable to form a coherent sentence. I just... Anduin's eyes bore into Joey. "You are being partial. This is connivance. If you continue like this, who else will respect you? He gestured towards the students standing nearby. If someone violates discipline but isn't punished for various reasons, or if their punishment is postponed, it's the greatest injustice to those who strictly observe the rules. If I agree to your request, will I be fair to these disciplined companions around you? Joey glanced around in embarrassment. Seeing everyone with their heads bowed in silence, his face flushed. But Anduin wasn't finished. Take Mona, for example. Since she left the dormitory this morning, she has been strict with herself. She dresses neatly, has impeccable dining etiquette, and arrives at the hall at least 10 minutes before class. She greets faculty and staff proactively. Whenever she's with other students from the same college, they march in strict accordance with the standard of 2 in a row, 3 in a row. Anduin moved closer to Joey and whispered in his ear, "In my opinion, she wants to be a true Slytherin more than you." Though Anduin's voice was low, it resonated powerfully in the quiet environment. The well-behaved young wizards felt a surge of pride and strength. The chief had been watching them quietly, and they couldn't help but puff out their chests proudly. Mona, who had been praised by Anduin, blushed with excitement. She had simply followed the rules and did not expect such high praise from the chief. In stark contrast, Joey looked like he wanted to bury his face in his chest. Finally, he choked out, "I'm sorry, Chief. I was wrong." Lumen, standing next to him, mustered his courage and said, "It's my fault. It's none of Joey's business. I'm willing to accept the punishment. I deserve it." Having this awareness shows that you can still be saved, and your physical condition does make it difficult to continue the punishment. Anduin nodded to Lumen. Lumen's heart filled with hope, thinking Anduin might show leniency. But his excitement faded when Anduin pulled out a bottle of potion from his pocket. "This is an analgesic. Your arm is stronger than you think. The pain you feel is due to muscle strain. Drink a little of this, and you won't feel the pain." Anduin gave Lumen a few drops of the painkiller with a dropper, then turned back to the stone steps, leaving Lumen bewildered. The onlookers couldn't help but swallow nervously. This was too harsh. They would rather endure the pain than be given painkillers and forced to complete all punishments. The Slytherin students once again witnessed Anduin's strict enforcement of push-ups until everyone finished. Lumen, after taking the analgesic, managed to complete the punishment, showing the effectiveness of the medicine. The ground on the stone steps was almost soaked with the sweat of the punished students. "Continue. Next item," Anduin said, flipping the record board in his hand expressionlessly. "There are people who did not follow the standard queue." He listed the names of those who violated discipline, but this time, Lumen was relieved. His name wasn't on the list, and he was truly frightened. Despite having taken painkillers, he felt as though his arms were no longer his own, utterly devoid of strength. The young wizards in the audience were beginning to understand the true meaning of rigorous discipline. They watched as Anduin read out a list, commanded them to do push-ups, and then moved on to the next item, repeating the process. Each punishment served as a stark reminder of the disciplinary regulations, embedding them deeper into everyone's memory. Finally, the notifications and punishments for violating discipline were over. More than 1/3 of the young wizards had made mistakes on the first day and paid the price for it. Among all the grades today, only the 7th graders have not violated the rules. The rest of the grades have made mistakes. "Grade leaders, please take note," Anduin announced. "Every time you violate discipline, you will not only be punished but also have points deducted from your grade. These points will reset every month. The top and bottom grades each month will receive surprises. Your performance today was really poor. I hope I don't see this again. From now on, scores and offenders will be announced at the weekly meeting. Since this is your first offense, the punishment is only 30 push-ups. In the future, it will increase to 50. Take care of yourselves." Today's disciplinary briefing took too long, wasting self-study time. Therefore, self-study is postponed by 2 hours, and study group activities are canceled and postponed by 1 day, Anduin concluded, before announcing the start of self-study. Due to the extensive punishments, the process took over an hour, necessitating the postponement. During the self-study period, subject representatives became active, seeking out students who were struggling in their respective subjects for tutoring, based on the transcripts provided by Anduin. Anduin himself was the subject representative for Defense Against the Dark Arts and Ancient Runes, so he quickly got involved. As a department representative, Anduin's demeanor was markedly different from when he was the head of the academy. On the stone platform, he was solemn and ruthless, but during tutoring, he was calm, gentle, and patient. Even those he had just punished were treated equally during self-study. One young wizard, who had been punished earlier, bravely stepped forward to ask a question. Anduin responded with calm, detailed, and methodical answers, giving the student a deeper understanding of him. When casting the repelling spell, in addition to gestures and incantations, it is crucial to have a firm intention to drive away and repel the target. Otherwise, the spell will be as weak as it was during your exam last year. This is a core skill for both attack and defense spells, Anduin explained to the young wizard seeking advice. End of this chapter. Chapter 274, Dog Monitoring. So that's the case then. Chief, would you like to guide us in casting spells yourself? Even if it's just a demonstration, I really want to see it. Mona, who had been praised by Anduin earlier, eagerly asked as she stood beside him. At your level, you should be able to use this self-defense spell proficiently, Anduin replied, knowing Mona's capabilities. Although she didn't excel in every subject like Ibrahimovic and Janie, she was still quite competent in most areas. It's like this, Chief. I understand the principle of the spell, but since the Defense Against the Dark Arts class rarely has practical lessons, I can't use it proficiently even though I can pass the exam, Mona explained, her face flushing with a mix of shyness and determination. I see, Anduin mused for a moment. After the evening self-study session in 3 days, there will be a makeup class for the Defense Against the Dark Arts study group. Although you're not on the makeup class list, if you want to stay and attend, I'll demonstrate the spell personally. Thank you, Chief. Mona and the few wizards beside her stammered their gratitude before slowly turning around and leaving. Anduin's approachable demeanor during the evening study session helped to slightly ease the previously tense atmosphere at the academy. The little wizards found that they could relax a bit while studying, which paradoxically made them more enthusiastic about their studies. As Anduin announced the end of the self-study time, many young wizards were reluctant to leave the stone hall, knowing they would have to be on edge again the next day. The following day, the little snakes who were knocked on the door by the head of the grade found that Anduin had disappeared again. They weren't fooled this time. Although they didn't know how Anduin managed to observe so many people simultaneously, they understood that the chief might be hiding somewhere, watching them. This realization made the grade leaders even more vigilant, especially Joey. Half of the fourth graders had made mistakes the previous day and were punished. Joey, having been taught a lesson by Anduin, realized that not strictly adhering to discipline would harm the students around him. His inspection today was meticulous to the bone. Lumen, who had sadly suffered 3 punishments the previous night, persevered despite his sore body and leaden arms, diligently completing his housework. Mona, Joey called out, looking at the female classmate with some embarrassment. He hadn't spoken to her much since they started school. What's wrong? Mona's expression was a bit stiff as she responded. You know I'm not the brightest, and after the chief reminded me yesterday, I realized that you're more careful and remember the discipline rules better. Could you help me, or guide me on how to ensure everyone doesn't make mistakes? Joey asked, looking at the girl in front of him with some trepidation. All right, Mona agreed, not used to seeing Joey so humble, but she nodded kindly. Oh my God, my lord, the conversation between these two is too stiff. Do they always talk like this? A huge dog's head appeared beside Anduin, sniffing the steaming espresso in his hand, and then staring at the mirror in front of them. This was Hog, who looked like a dog, but was actually a wolf. He and Anduin were relaxing in the dormitory. Anduin sat gracefully with his legs crossed, drinking coffee, while Hog deftly fiddled with the instrument in front of him. The equipment resembled a large dressing table, but the upper part was, unlike the large mirror of an ordinary dressing table, This setup featured dozens of small mirrors arranged in an orderly manner, each reflecting different images. In these mirrors, one could see various little wizards, particularly those from Slytherin. Anduin, unlike these young wizards, did not hide his body and follow them step by step. It was impossible for him to be in multiple places at once to monitor others. Instead, he relied on the device in front of him, which he called a magic monitor. This monitor had been prepared at the end of the previous school year. At that time, Anduin intended to investigate the activities of these young wizards in the academy. After a few weeks of tracking them with the disillusionment charm, he found the process too slow and decided to create this device. It utilized the principles of the Flu network and his crow technique to share vision. When Anduin wanted to activate the monitor, he would release dozens of little ravens, cast the illusion spell on them, and then share their vision with the mirrors. This allowed him to monitor the young wizards closely and flexibly, as long as they were within Hogwarts in real time. This way, he didn't have to exhaust himself running around and still had time for his own activities. The most excited about this setup was Hog, who had been led by Cheeky into Anduin's dormitory the day before. Although Hog had spent the last school year at Hogwarts, he hadn't been inside the castle yet, and he was thrilled to be in a new place. Upon entering Anduin's bedroom, he discovered the magical monitor, which he found far more interesting than chewing on table legs. Hog eagerly volunteered to supervise the young wizards for Anduin. Anduin, realizing he couldn't manage all the surveillance alone, welcomed Hog's assistance. Anduin soon witnessed what a true monitor, or rather, a monitor dog, could do. Hog seemed to integrate seamlessly with the monitor. Not only could he observe different mirrors with his left and right eyes simultaneously, but he could also meticulously capture any instances of rule-breaking. The previous day, Anduin had caught almost all the young wizards who violated the rules, clearly pointing out their infractions. None of them protested. They all admitted their mistakes and accepted their punishments on the spot. This impressive monitoring accuracy further intimidated the rule-breaking wizards, making them feel as if they were under constant scrutiny. All of this was actually Hog's doing. After confirming that he couldn't match Hog's monitoring skills, Anduin spent the afternoon barbecuing and petting cats at the Forbidden Forest hut. At this moment, Hog was squinting his small eyes, intently staring at the monitoring mirrors. Just when one might think he was focused in one direction, his eyeballs would dart around at an incredible speed. Then, with a cold grin, he would deftly grab a quill with his paw and carefully record any infractions on a piece of parchment. End of this chapter. Chapter 275, 3 Types of Subjects. Have you memorized the names of these little wizards? Anduin couldn't help but confirm, surprised that Hog had made progress so quickly. Don't worry, my lord. You don't need to identify me after noon yesterday. Didn't you see that what I recorded yesterday afternoon was not very accurate? Hog replied confidently, clearly at ease with the task. Compared to hustling a single person in Diagon Alley, Hog was obviously more interested in monitoring a project that involved over 100 people at once. Anduin was pleased with this development. With Hog's assistance, he could now use his free time to create the teaching aids he had envisioned. As a student who excelled in all subjects, Anduin had a deep understanding of the Hogwarts exams and the Wizarding World standards. Hogwarts offered 7 main courses and 5 sub-courses, which Anduin categorized into 3 types: theoretical knowledge subjects, theoretical practice subjects, and spellcasting practice subjects. Theoretical knowledge subjects primarily relied on memory, understanding, and observation. As long as students were willing to spend time reading and memorizing books, or had good test-taking skills, like highlighting key points and cramming, they could achieve good grades. Anduin referred to these as theoretical knowledge subjects. These courses included history of magic, arithmancy, muggle studies, and divination. Of course, this classification was based on Hogwarts examination requirements and did not mean that these subjects never involved spellcasting. For instance, arithmancy and divination required practical skills. However, divination at Hogwarts was particularly notorious. Professor Trelawney rarely taught actual divination, and the exams were mainly written. For the young wizards in Slytherin, Anduin's arrangement of self-study time made theoretical knowledge subjects manageable. His goal for these subjects was to help students cope with exams and achieve good grades. For someone like Anduin, who was familiar with exam strategies, these courses were relatively simple. His strategies included focusing on key points, using a large number of practice questions, and leveraging past exam questions. He instructed several department representatives to collect past exam content, either from their own memory or by contacting graduates. They recorded the regular examination content of each professor. During college committee meetings, Anduin had department representatives highlight key points for grades 1 to 5 and common test areas for each grade. They used past exam questions as practice for the next monthly test, ensuring that key points and test questions aligned. Regarding betting on exam questions, Anduin divided it into two parts. One part involved representatives predicting questions based on experience before future exams. The other part involved collecting questions that professors inadvertently revealed during class. After entering Hogwarts, Anduin found the school's exams somewhat frustrating. Many professors had a habit of leaking questions, making it easy for students to get good grades. Despite this, many students still failed or barely passed. But things were different now. Anduin planned to manage the exam preparation uniformly. Although it was only the beginning of the semester, many teachers leaked questions not just before the end of the semester, but also when they started teaching a new spell or topic. Anduin organized a team of grade leaders to compile a collection of test questions for each grade and subject, aiming to prepare a comprehensive review for the end of the semester. The subjects were categorized into theoretical and practical subjects, which included courses with substantial theoretical content that also required practical application, though spellcasting was infrequent. These subjects demanded significant memorization and understanding to pass the exams, which could be either practical or written, depending on the professor's preferences. Anduin identified 4 courses under his category: herbology, astronomy, ancient runes, and care of magical creatures. For instance, astronomy and ancient runes involved minimal spellcasting. Astronomy focused on identifying constellations, often culminating in practical exams. Ancient runes required mastering translation content, though the runes themselves had magical properties, necessitating some spellcasting practice in lectures and advanced exams. The study of these 2 courses was similar to theoretical knowledge subjects, relying mainly on reading and a bit of practice. Herbology and care of magical creatures, on the other hand, required more hands-on experience. Tutoring these subjects was challenging because many herbs and magical creatures couldn't be brought into the common room. For care of magical creatures, many of the necessary animals were housed in the Forbidden Forest Lodge. Although Anduin was well acquainted with Hagrid and Professor Kettleburn, he preferred not to trouble them. Instead, he planned to use one of his newly developed teaching aids. This teaching aid was a large curtain Anduin had used at the beginning of the school year. It was woven with silk from the Inspiration Snow Cicada, a material Karkaroff had sourced from Northern Europe. This silk had a unique affinity for thought and memory, which Anduin had researched extensively while looking for ways to treat the Longbottoms. The silk could sense changes in thought, allowing the curtain to display people's thoughts as words or pictures. Anduin intended to lend this curtain to students in herbology and care of magical creatures. Department representatives could project images of herbs or magical creatures from their memories onto the screen, aiding the students in their semi-practical learning. The final category, spell-casting practical subjects, included courses that required regular spell-casting practice, with exams primarily being practical. These subjects also had significant theoretical content, but written tests accounted for a smaller portion of the overall grade. This category included transfiguration, charms, potions, and defense against the dark arts. Success in these courses required ample practice and a deep understanding of spell-casting principles. Without sufficient practice and comprehension, improvement would be difficult. End of this chapter. Chapter 276. New Teaching Aids. The potion class at Hogwarts rarely offers opportunities for hands-on practice. Brewing potions requires various materials, and the process of casting spells is integral to potion making. Fortunately, the professor for this course is their head of house, Snape. Known for favoring his own students, Snape is always more patient with the students of Slytherin during class. The professors of the other three spellcasting practice subjects, Transfiguration and Charms, are very responsible. They explain the content meticulously and provide excellent guidance during practice sessions. What the students need most is practice. However, Defense Against the Dark Arts is a different story. The frequent changes in professors have led to inconsistent teaching quality. Although it is a spellcasting practice subject, some professors spend the entire year on theoretical lessons, offering little to no practical experience. This leaves students who lack self-motivation with minimal knowledge of self-defense spells. When a new professor takes over, if they focus on practical lessons, students often find themselves unable to keep up with the new curriculum. Consequently, most students at Hogwarts, not just in Slytherin, have poor grades in Defense Against the Dark Arts. To address this issue, Anduin not only took on the role of subject representative for this course, but also created a special teaching aid for auxiliary training. He had been working on this project for a while, using his spare time to draw up plans, and finally completed it recently. Anduin invited Hog to watch with great interest as he approached a corner of the bedroom. There, a vaguely humanoid figure, covered by a cloth, stood about his height. He lifted the cloth to reveal what lay beneath. A mannequin with only the upper body, fixed to the ground with a bracket. The head was faceless, and the overall texture was a mix of wood and metal. This prop was a humanoid target specifically designed for practicing magic spells. However, Anduin's creation had unique functions and effects compared to ordinary humanoid targets. Firstly, it featured a numeric dial that could measure the power of spells. When hit by a spell, a value would appear on the target's chest. This value was based on the impact spell, the lowest magic power output, as the standard unit. The impact spell's force increased with more magic power input, with the minimum impact spell being roughly equivalent to pushing a wine glass. When an attack spell hit the humanoid target, it displayed a value indicating how many impact spells it equaled. This measurement was based on the spell's destructiveness and power, not just its impact force. In addition to sensing the power of spells, Anduin added spells to sense temperature, completeness, and healing. The target would make a comprehensive score based on the defensive magic power loss, the degree of damage to the target, and the temperature change. This standard was determined by Anduin after extensive research. For example, ordinary standard mana weapons could cast at least 15 points. The repelling spell that Mona consulted about yesterday required at least 30 points to be considered a standard spell. Using this function, Anduin could roughly gauge the mastery of the student's spells during practice. Many spells needed precise measurement to determine if they were cast correctly. The head is actually a detachable ball, which has been given an anti-transformation charm with adjustable strength. This charm can be used to practice transfiguration and conversion spells. The ball is made of materials that are easy to deform, making it quick to use for transformation techniques. Once proficient with ordinary transformation techniques, you can activate the anti-transformation charm on it, gradually increasing the difficulty of deformation. When the anti-transformation charm is activated to its maximum, even Anduin would have to concentrate to transform it. This humanoid target can also cast spells like the Iron Armor, Curse, Obstacle Curse, and Illusion Curse along its entire body, allowing for armor breaking and invisibility tests. Additionally, Anduin has equipped this target with a fire function. When activated, a worn-out magic wand he acquired from the black market will pop out from the chest of the humanoid target and shoot forward to deflect curses and disarm opponents. This function is mainly for senior wizards to practice the Iron Armor Curse. The humanoid target has a solid body, good self-healing ability, and can absorb and store magical energy when hit, displaying the opponent's attack power. The head can be used to practice transfiguration and can also fire spells, serving as an auxiliary prop for spell practice. Anduin has only made one so far and plans to test it out in practice over the next few nights. If it works well, he will make a few more. This is a good opportunity to use these young wizards to test the quality control of this item. It can be improved in the future and sold as a product to the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic. Anduin also thought of using some cheap materials to make other tactical equipment and rewarding these young wizards as prizes. This would allow for user experience analysis in advance, which is conducive to product innovation. He nodded, pleased with his idea. After all, these young wizards are such good experimental subjects. It would be a waste not to use them. As Anduin began to dream of his plans, the young Slytherins had already started to get used to acting according to the rules he set. After experiencing the shock of the previous day, they now felt anxious no matter what they did. They were cautious when eating, dared not speak, and were very careful when walking. If there were more than 2 people around them, they would immediately change their formation. Their housekeeping and etiquette also changed. They polished their leather shoes to shine every day, and their clothes were smoothed with magic spells without a trace of wrinkles, for fear of being caught by the chief. They even greeted everyone, including Filch, whom they had hated in the past. This strange change made even the usually fierce-eyed administrator a little embarrassed. The most confused person was actually Snape himself. Busy with various matters outside the school, he could only return during school hours. But when he did, he felt as if he had gone to the wrong place. As soon as he walked into the corridor, he saw an orderly row of students greeting him with serious faces. Although he is the headmaster of Slytherin, the students of the Snake Academy are still very afraid of him. Chapter 277. The 3 Qualities of a Wizard. Every time these little wizards saw him, they either timidly said hello and ran away, or immediately turned around to avoid him. Sometimes he even approached them with a penetrating gaze to teach them a lesson. But why had all these students changed in just 2 or 3 days? Suddenly, they all behaved so well that he couldn't even find a reason to reprimand them. At night, when he finally had time to inspect the academy, he found that the entire common room had changed. Upon entering the stone hall of the dungeon, he noticed that even the tapestries depicting the adventures of famous Slytherins had been removed. In their place hung rows of banners in silver on a green background, all bearing inspirational quotes like, "As long as you don't die, learn from the dead," and "Details determine success or failure. Attitude determines everything." Snape, who was looking at these banners, felt a little out of place. When he looked down at the little wizards in the academy, he saw a group of students sitting neatly at a long table, either quietly doing their homework or asking their seniors questions. The only sounds were the rustling of pages, the scratching of quills against parchment, and the muffled exchanges of questions and answers. Entering such a quiet place with such a strong study atmosphere made Snape feel so stressed that he didn't even dare to make a sound, as if disturbing these children was a crime. At that moment, after glancing around, he realized that he was the only one who seemed out of place in the entire common room. This made him curl his lips helplessly and leave silently from the entrance. No one in the dungeon even noticed that the dean had been there. Since those little wizards were severely punished that night, they had indeed become much more disciplined. No matter what they thought in their hearts, their behavior had become standardized. This was the beginning of developing good habits. In the past 2 days, even Hogg, who was squatting in front of the magic monitor all day long, could only catch 2 or 3 little wizards violating the rules each day. Anduin didn't punish them during late self-study. The 2-day study group was organized in an orderly manner under the department representative's guidance. After 9 p.m., Anduin was in charge of tutoring the 5th grade group, while 2 5th grade deputies instructed the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades respectively. On the 3rd day, the Defense Against the Dark Arts class study group, personally guided by Anduin, officially started. But today was different from the past. Apart from those young wizards with poor academic performance, many others voluntarily stayed to observe. Those who stayed accounted for more than half of the entire courtyard. The main reason was that the grades in this course were too poor, with almost half of the students passing or failing. Additionally, many knew that there would be practical learning tonight, and they all wanted to learn from the chief. After all, this was a world-famous fighting hero. Seeing so many people staying, Anduin rubbed his chin and thought for a moment. He decided to take advantage of today's tutoring time to hold an open class and test these students' practical abilities. Lewis, Leo, help me put away the chairs and stack them in the corner. There are too many people today, so I'll give them a lesson at the same time, Anduin instructed his two original assistants. Since you are so interested in defense against the dark arts, let's all listen. Anduin faced the crowd and commanded loudly, everyone lean back, the shorter ones stand in front, and stand alternately. After a while of organizing, the space in the stone hall was cleared. Anduin stood in the center, and the rest of the students formed a U-shape around him, ready to learn. As the curious crowd gathered around him, Anduin drew out his wand and began his professional counseling. Defense against the dark arts is a subject focused on learning how to deal with dark magic spells and malevolent creatures. Many of you should have already studied the textbook and learned about these creatures. Today, we will focus on practical application, skipping over the theoretical content. Following Anduin's explanation, everyone nodded in agreement. After all, theoretical knowledge can often be memorized. All right, let's get straight to the point, Anduin continued. With a wave of his wand, a prop dummy appeared out of thin air in the open space nearby. This was his new teaching aid. The spells in defense against the dark arts are primarily self-defense and counterspells. These spells are not fundamentally different from ordinary spells, Anduin explained. All wizards who want to cast spells must possess 3 basic qualities. At this, the crowd looked at each other in confusion. 3 basic qualities? This was a new concept to them. The first quality is magic power, which determines how many spells we can cast, Anduin said. As soon as he finished speaking, strong magical fluctuations emanated from his body, pressing down on everyone with a palpable sense of oppression. This feeling lasted only a few seconds before Anduin stopped the magic wave. Even this brief experience left everyone gasping, overwhelmed by the sheer power. This was the first time they had seen Anduin display his strength so openly. The second basic quality, Anduin continued, unfazed by the odd expressions around him, is magic sensitivity. Most people understand it superficially as magic perception, but there are essential differences. Magic perception is a form of magic sensitivity, but it affects more than just perception. It directly influences our perception, affinity, and control of magic, Anduin elaborated. He put away his wand and waved his hand lightly. From the inside pocket of his robe, more than a dozen copper nuts floated out, arranging themselves in a string. They moved through his arms, wrists, and fingers as if they were alive. The crowd watched, mesmerized. The ordinary copper nuts seemed to come alive in Anduin's hands, and he did this without using a wand. Even many senior wizards who were about to graduate felt a sense of shame at their own abilities in comparison. End of this chapter. Chapter 278. Gathering Will. Everyone's sensitivity to magic power varies, making it difficult to judge on your own. To improve, you need frequent spellcasting practice. It's best to exhaust all your magic power and then savor the process of its recovery. This is a very painful process, Anduin explained, leisurely fiddling with the copper coins on his fingertips, as if they were an extension of his body. The young wizards around him listened intently. Most of the younger wizards wore blank expressions, clearly not understanding, while the senior wizards looked thoughtful, gradually digesting the content. And the third quality, Anduin raised his finger and pointed to his head, it's in you, your thoughts. Flexible thought changes and rich imagination determine how specific the objects you transform with the transformation technique are. Emotional ups and downs, firm willpower, these thoughts directly influence the strength of your spellcasting. The greater the emotional fluctuations, the greater the increase in magic power. Positive emotions benefit protective magic. For example, the Patronus charm requires you to concentrate, think about the happiest thing in your heart, and then call out the incantation, Expecto Patronum. As Anduin explained, he closed his eyes. When he yelled Expecto Patronum, his wand shook slightly, and a stream of silver-white gas gushed from its tip, gathering into a raven that flew wildly in mid-air. Seeing this, the senior wizards next to him showed envious expressions. None of them had ever heard of anyone who could master this spell, let alone the junior wizards who were stunned. Negative emotions impact black magic. Some say black magic lures people to degenerate. In my opinion, the two actually influence each other. Intense hatred, anger, and resentment can amplify black magic, but black magic will also subtly amplify the negative emotions in our hearts. If you have strong willpower and can persist, your mind will be filled with endless negative energy, like being controlled by black magic in turn. You'd better not try it, or you might fall into it accidentally, Anduin warned the crowd seriously. The surrounding people showed slightly terrified expressions, but some of the little wizards couldn't help asking their own questions. "Chief, have you ever tried black magic?" "Me?" Anduin's mouth curved slightly as he glanced at the little wizard non-committally. "You can guess, but if I find that you are trying black magic indiscriminately, don't blame me for being rude." The little wizard who asked the question shrank his shoulders in shock from Anduin's gaze, and the little wizards beside him also forcibly suppressed their curiosity. In fact, Anduin had tried black magic. When he finally caught the living werewolf in the Forbidden Forest, he attempted to cast the Cruciatus Curse. He wanted to use it to study the condition of the Longbottoms, but as soon as he cast it, he immediately felt a strange sensation in his mind. A strong urge to kill and torment people arose, bringing a tingling pleasure that made it hard to stop. Fortunately, Anduin reacted quickly. He realized something was wrong with this emotional change, so he stopped immediately and relied on his strong willpower to suppress the negative emotions that kept surfacing. Since then, he has maintained considerable restraint on black magic, especially powerful black magic, as he cannot accept losing control of his consciousness. "Let's not dwell on these emotional influences," Anduin shook his head. "What I want you to learn and try today is the magic driven by willpower, which is more stable and it's not easy to mobilize emotions. Out of control." Willpower? The little wizards around listened to the explanation and couldn't help but ponder. Clearly, they didn't have much understanding of this aspect. The stronger the will, the stronger the power of the spellcast. The self-defense spells you learned in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class are difficult to reach the standard without any bonus. Nay, XT, I'll demonstrate it for you. Anduin held his wand and walked slowly to the opposite side of the humanoid target. "I will not increase the magic power output, nor will I allow any emotional fluctuations. I will cast a repelling spell with an empty mind. Observe the effect." Anduin deliberately suppressed his instincts, emptied his mind, and pointed at the humanoid target. "Quickly knock back." After he finished chanting the incantation, a translucent light bullet wobbled and hit the target, making a dull sound. The chest of the humanoid target lit up, displaying a row of values, 26. The little wizards on both sides looked at the human-shaped target with curiosity. "Why does this target display numbers?" "This target is an alchemy tool, and the number displayed represents the power of the spell. A standard repelling spell must have a power of at least 30 or more. The spell I cast just now didn't meet the standard. Raise your hands if you've experienced a similar situation when casting a spell." Anduin looked around. After a moment of thought, the surrounding crowd raised their hands, creating a sea of hands as far as the eye could see. However, most eyes remained fixed on the humanoid target, intrigued by its ability to measure spell power. "Don't just watch. You'll all have a chance to practice in a while. Let me finish the demonstration first. That was a wrong demonstration. Now, observe the role of willpower in casting a spell." Anduin raised his wand again and pointed at the target from afar. "First, you must concentrate and not be disturbed by external factors. Then, gather your will. Imagine yourself as a sharp sword or the sharpest thing you can think of. Keep suppressing yourself like a bowstring being constantly stretched. Compress all your attention and spiritual power into this sharp sword. When you say the spell, it's like releasing the bowstring, fully unleashing your power. Quickly knock back." The cold incantation echoed in the stone hall. The tone and sound seemed identical to the previous casting. But this time, a condensed milky white magical light bullet shot out like an arrow from a bow, even leaving a small trail in the air. End of this chapter. Chapter 279, Power Value. In the blink of an eye, a beam of light slammed into the human-shaped target standing not far away. A loud noise echoed through the stone hall, reminiscent of a large bell being struck by a pendulum. The sound waves and vibrations created an aftermath, causing a brief gust of wind to hit everyone's faces, and the rocky ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. The humanoid target, a testament to the powerful properties of alchemy, withstood the impact. Despite the tremendous force, it remained anchored, its bracket seemingly rooted in place. However, the impact was so great that the target bent backward, almost forming a 180-degree angle with the ground. After the force dissipated, the target rebounded violently, bouncing back and forth more than a dozen times before gradually stabilizing. At that moment, the onlookers could clearly see the value displayed on the chest of the humanoid target. 238. Hiss. Everyone took a deep breath. The dramatic display, coupled with the impressive value, made them reassess the chief standing before them. Their eyes widened in astonishment as they looked at Anduin. Anduin, however, stared blankly at the humanoid target, deep in thought. Well, the initial test of the humanoid target performed well. At least the quality is passable. It can withstand 7% of my impact spell. So, as long as it is not a spell with exaggerated destructive power like Li Huo or Wild Thunder, it can handle most conventional self-defense spells and dark magic. He snapped back to reality, noticing the stunned expressions around him. Why are you staring blankly? Remember what I just said. I don't want to repeat myself. Concentrate when casting a spell. Imagine yourself as steel, unafraid of pain. Wizards above the 3rd grade, line up according to your grade. Let me see how much you've absorbed. If you do not perform well, you must practice more in the future. Anduin's eyes sharpened as he glanced around. The little wizards, still in shock, hurriedly lined up behind Anduin. Initially, Anduin planned to have only the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades practice, focusing on the problem students. However, the senior students also joined the line, clearly interested in the humanoid target that could display the power of their spells. They all wanted to test their strength. Soon, a long line formed. The first 3rd-year student, excited and nervous, pulled out his wand and shouted, "Quickly knock back," with great enthusiasm. However, when his spell hit the target, it only displayed a value of 15 points, far weaker than Anduin's deliberately lowered spell. The surrounding crowd couldn't help but laugh, making the student feel extremely embarrassed. Calm down. It's not about how loudly you chant the spell, it's about focus. Try again, Anduin urged solemnly. Yes, Chief, the little wizard replied, trembling. He carefully recalled Anduin's instructions, closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to concentrate. Blushing, he cast the spell again. 21. The value displayed on the humanoid target was higher this time. Although still not very strong, it was a significant improvement. Good, there's progress. You need to practice this way after class. Step back now. Next one. Anduin nodded approvingly. The little wizard nodded and stepped back, feeling a bit more confident. Reluctantly, the little wizard stepped aside. The performance of the next student was even less impressive. His first attempt at the knockback jinx only scored 13 points. After Anduin had him try 3 more times, he barely managed to reach 20 points. This result disheartened the other 3rd-year students. Was it really that difficult? They had even laughed at the first person who tried it. After Anduin quantified the power of the spell, these young wizards were forced to confront the reality of their own abilities for the first time. Many of them had previously believed their spellcasting skills were quite good. However, today's test revealed that they were merely average. In Anduin's eyes, this was not surprising. These young wizards rarely had opportunities to practice casting spells. Although the knockback jinx was taught in the 3rd year, it wasn't actually tested until the 4th year. As time went on, the 3rd-year students quickly completed their turns, with most scoring between 20 and 25 points. But when it was the last student's turn, his performance astonished everyone. The sound of his spell hitting the humanoid target was markedly different from the others, and the target displayed a score of 53 points. The crowd erupted in exclamations. It was Ibrahimovic standing in front of the target, a student who had been under Anduin's tutelage for 2 years. Staring at the target in disbelief, Ibrahimovic realized just how much he had improved thanks to Anduin's training. Have you lost your touch? I remember your spellcasting was faster last year. Or, did you pick up bad habits from Charles and the others and slack off during the summer? Anduin asked, his tone stern. He didn't seem to care about the amazed looks from the others, focusing instead on Ibrahimovic. Ibrahimovic, who had been marveling at his own strength, immediately tensed up at Anduin's questioning. No, I didn't slack off with Bill and the others. I just wasn't focused enough. Let me try again. I'll definitely meet the standard next time. He hurriedly replied. Anduin looked at him, unimpressed. Forget it. Don't waste time here. Get back to training. If your performance doesn't improve, don't blame me for assigning you special training. At the mention of special training, Ibrahimovic's face paled, as if recalling something dreadful. He quickly nodded and moved aside. The conversation between Anduin and Ibrahimovic was overheard by everyone. Ibrahimovic's impressive performance had already left them in awe, but Anduin's comments suggested that it still wasn't good enough. This revelation made them look at both Ibrahimovic and Anduin with newfound respect. Could Ibrahimovic's strength be attributed to his relationship with Anduin? The thought lingered in their minds. Anduin, already a figure shrouded in mystery, seemed even more enigmatic. Just when they thought they understood him, more layers of mystery would emerge, making it impossible to fully grasp the chief's true nature. End of this chapter. Chapter 280. Please give us a chance. Ignoring the thoughts of others, Anduin continued to arrange practice drills. When it was the turn of the fourth-year students, the number of spells cast was significantly higher than that of the third-year students. For example, Mona's normal spell casting was already around 20 points. After Anduin's guidance, she could reach 27 or 28 points. With a little more practice, she might be able to reach the standard level. The overall level of the fourth-year students ranged between 25 to 32 points, and most of them couldn't reach the standard value. Despite this, they felt extremely ashamed because they realized they were not as good as Ibrahimovic from the third year, and the gap was quite large. In fact, with their current level, passing the final exam wouldn't be a problem. Even someone like Mona could get an E, exceeds expectations, because the professor didn't have a standard instrument like Anduin and could only rely on experience, which allowed for a few points of error. However, Anduin didn't want them to rely on luck. He wanted solid results. From the fifth year onwards, the foundation of spellcasting had already exceeded 30 points, with the average level close to 40 points, and some students even surpassing it. But with Ibrahimovic scoring 53 points as a comparison, their level seemed insufficient. Despite this, Anduin praised them, which made them feel even more ashamed and determined to practice harder. The best performer in the fifth year was Vivienne, who scored 52 points in the first spellcasting practice, astonishing everyone around her. In the eyes of everyone in the snake yard, Vivienne was a cheerful gossip girl who usually practiced Quidditch or played mahjong in the common room. No one expected her to be so strong. Anduin, however, looked at her quite speechlessly. Is this the result of your training for so long? You can't even compare to Ibrahimovic? Seeing Anduin's eyes, Vivienne understood his dissatisfaction, but just stuck out her tongue mischievously, apparently not caring about it. When it was the turn of the sixth and seventh year students to practice, they all tried their best to adjust their state and perform well. These high-level students were indeed impressive. At their age, they could be considered adult wizards, and their physical fitness was far superior to the junior students. The repelling spells they cast could reach at least 50 points, with some seventh-year students even hitting 80 points. Among them, Merlin performed the best. The man-shaped target he hit with the repelling curse fell back sharply, and the value displayed finally broke through 100 points, reaching as many as 116 points. Everyone was dumbfounded. However, when Merlin saw the value he had achieved, his first reaction was to scratch his head in embarrassment, and then explain to Anduin that he wasn't lazy before, but had been busy recently, and his level had fallen due to fatigue or something. It was only at this time that the onlookers realized that Ibrahimovic, Vivienne, and Merlin, who had performed amazingly before, all had a good relationship with Anduin. Could it be that they were so strong because of Anduin? Thinking of this, everyone seemed to have discovered a clue, and their eyes on Anduin became even more eager. First, Chief, Joey, who had the most impulsive personality, couldn't help it at this moment and moved to Anduin's side nervously. "What's the matter? Everyone has already practiced today. If you want to practice again, you'll have to wait for the next study group." Anduin thought that Joey still wanted to continue practicing. No, I want to ask. Ibrahimovic and Velen are so strong. Did you teach them some secrets?" Joey clasped his fingers in embarrassment. In his eyes, this might be Anduin's secret, and he felt a bit awkward asking about it so directly. The secret? The secret is training, scientific training, high-intensity training. What? Do you want to try? It was the first time Anduin saw someone interested in training, much like those in his Aining class who thought about fishing. "Is this okay?" Joey clearly didn't understand what Anduin meant. He only wondered if he could become as strong after participating in Anduin's so-called training. Joey's question also echoed the doubts in the hearts of those around him, and the little wizards nearby stared at Anduin with wide eyes. "Oh, it seems everyone is very interested in this." Anduin noticed the curious eyes of the people around him. After a moment of thought, he understood the key point. Seeing this, Anduin rubbed his chin slightly. He didn't mind training others. After all, training 1 or 10 made little difference to him. However, the primary reason he brought Charles and the others to train was to collect data and develop the most effective methods for improving the quality of wizards, mainly for his own use. After so many years, he had almost all the relevant data he needed. He had no intention of expanding the training scale, mainly because he was lazy and wanted to spend more time on research, but seeing everyone's interest, he thought he could use this training to his advantage. "Since everyone has thoughts in this regard, I can't be too selfish," Anduin said seriously, with a straight face. The people around him quickly nodded, eager for his response. "But—" Anduin hesitated for a moment, elongating his tone, making everyone anxious with anticipation. "This training is unique to me, a special skill that can enhance the quality of wizards. So, it can't be shared so casually." Anduin shook his head. "Can we do it? If we can, please give us a chance. We also want to become stronger." Joey, a well-known combatant, expressed his strong desire to improve. "Yeah, we also want to become stronger. Don't worry, I will work hard." "How can I miss such an opportunity? As long as you propose it, I will do my best." Many wizards around him interrupted and shouted. "Well, since your wishes are so strong, it wouldn't be right not to give you a chance. But it comes with conditions." Anduin nodded. Velen, Vivienne, and Evie, who were on the sidelines, had black lines on their faces. Was Anduin trying to trick others into joining their training? They never did such deceitful things. They were now trying to find ways to sneak around every day, as they were too tired from long-term high-intensity exercise. End of this chapter.